So good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar with Cynthia Bampton. Cynthia is the co-founder of the Awaken Life Project, which is dedicated to helping men and women realize that spiritual freedom is always available here and now, and crucially, how to live this truth in daily life. Cynthia has been my teacher for over 10 years, and I'm really indebted to her and her ability to see and express precisely what I need to hear to see through my own habitual ego patterns. So I really strongly encourage you to participate fully in this webinar. And when there's an opportunity to interact with Cynthia, if you want to comment or ask a question, don't hold back, because it's really an amazing opportunity to discover your own freedom. And with that, I will hand over to Cynthia.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's really good to see some faces I haven't seen for a while. Nice to see you, Jane, for one. Okay, let's just take a few minutes to meditate like we normally do. So if everyone can just sit up very straight and put your feet flat on the floor if you're in a chair or on a couch. And close your eyes. Just take a moment to relax. And feel the body. Feeling the breath coming in and out. If you want to, take a deep breath in, bringing all the air deep into your being. And as you exhale, release any tension. And again, inhaling, feel the breath, feel the body expand. And when you exhale, release all the tension. And one more time, inhaling and exhaling. Just allow your breath to be a little bit more relaxed, but make sure that you're still allowing your body to breathe. Letting the shoulders relax. Keeping the head up. It doesn't matter what your experience is. You may have a busy mind. You may have a quiet mind. It doesn't really matter. You may feel enlightened, or you may feel just very screwed up. Doesn't really matter. So as you sit here in meditation, just recognize the depth of your own being. It's not something you can create. It's not something you do. It's something you recognize. So as you sit, just be aware of the content that's arising within you right now. Maybe there's sensations in the body. Maybe you can hear sounds. Maybe thoughts are arising. Maybe nothing's happening. Just sit, be still, and observe. Don't judge. Don't try to have any particular experience. When you sit and do nothing, the mind might become agitated because the mind is usually very busy, labeling this, labeling that, figuring out this, figuring out that. It doesn't matter. The mind will do what the mind will do. The body will feel what the body feels. You are aware of the movement of all of it, with no preference, no imposition. Even if you feel agitated, it's only the body that experiences the agitation. You are that which is aware. You are always already free of any experience, any stress, any joy, anything. So as you sit, no matter what your experience is, can you just leave it alone? Can you do nothing with it? The mind may be reacting, but you are resting. The body may be agitated, but you are resting. You are still. If you think you are what you think, and if you think you are what you feel, you will never find stillness or deep ease of being that's prior to or before any particular experience. So be still, be happy, be free, be here, and witness the whole human experience that you may be having right now. So meditation is really the practice of witnessing, of not moving. The mind may move, but the witness does not. Okay, and take a deep breath in and exhale. And one more time, inhale. And as you exhale, just slowly open your eyes. All right. So we've got some new people on tonight, so welcome if you're a new person. And every webinar I do, I always put everything into a spiritual context, which basically means the context is that who you are at the deepest level is already free, already whole, already complete. The essence is love and happiness. That's your true nature. And of course, we're conditioned human beings. The body minds are very conditioned to believe that we're not naturally happy. We're not already free. We have a lot of problems to get over. And someday we might feel a little bit better. But of course, the habit is if you feel a little bit better, you're always worried that it's going to go away. So you don't really appreciate it. So freedom is very, very simple. And the truth is very, very simple. But as human beings, we tend to be very complex. So that's the battle that we're in. We're in this battle from complexity to simplicity. Complexity is really the egoic patterns that we have that is trying to convince you that you're separate, isolated, alone, victimized, that you're a problem, and that you're not free here and now. So that's what ego is. It's very destructive. It's not a thing. It's not a boogeyman that lives inside of you. It's basically a pattern that's based on rejection. It's based on limitation. And it's based on the insistence that you're separate from your true self. You're separate from your own heart. And you're separate from everyone and everything. So these are two different worlds that we're talking about. One is always already free. The essence of who you are is happiness and love. And the other is you'll never be free. Even if you think one day you will, that day will never come. And your life is based on victimization and rejection. So they're pretty, they're pretty far apart. And I think if you look at your own experience, you can see that when you put your attention on all the problems that you think you have, the experience is you become more and more isolated, more and more alone. You feel more and more rejected and more victimized. And then it's almost like you feel like you have this metal enclosure around you, or you have this backpack that's always weighing you down, or sometimes you feel it as a solid structure inside of you that's completely contracted. And that's what ego is. It's a contraction of consciousness. Freedom is basically free. It's all you really have to think about. Free is free. So in that freedom, there's no contraction. There's no heaviness. It's the complete opposite. Everybody with me so far? I just kind of wanted to remind everybody this, since it's the first webinar of 2021, since I missed the last one. So it's always good to remind yourselves like what the context is and what the obstacle, the so-called obstacle to your own freedom is. Ultimately, there is no obstacles other than the ones that live in your own mind. But they're not really obstacles because they disappear just like that when you decide not to put your attention on it. So the topic tonight, I haven't forgotten, the power of communication and dialogue. Okay, we're living in times right now that are pretty intense, depending on what country you live in. There's times of a lot of conflict, a lot of fear, but it's also the time where there's a lack of communication. There's a lack of empathy, there's a lack of understanding. And so when I was thinking about this webinar and I was thinking about the power of communication and dialogue, I thought, well, what's the opposite of communication and dialogue? And basically the opposite is projection and monologue, right? So it's interesting to look at it that way. So I'm just going to give you kind of a little list that I made up in thinking about this. Now, communication and dialogue is always regenerative. It always gives you more life, more space, more engagement, and you get in touch with reality. Okay, projection and monologue is based on fear, and it's degenerative. It pulls the life out of you. It's very heavy, and it's very inertic, and it's life, it takes life away, literally. So communication and dialogue, the regenerative characteristic is unity. Projection and monologue, the characteristic is separation. Communication and dialogue is sharing ideas. Projection and monologue is constant conflict. Communication and dialogue is access to a higher intelligence. Projection and monologue is egoic limitation. So just think about conversations that you have, okay, as I'm going through this list. Communication and dialogue brings love forward. Projection and monologue brings rejection forward. Communication and dialogue is about transparency. Projection and monologue is about hidden agendas. Communication and dialogue is trust. Projection and monologue is mistrust. Communication and dialogue is creative friction, which means you don't have to agree with each other, but you have a creative friction where two people come together and the friction is happening because you might not believe, you might not think the same way, but you don't divide. And out of that friction that's not dividing, something else comes forward that's creative. Projection and monologue is basically divisive friction. There's no coming together. Communication and dialogue is creativity. Projection and monologue is limitation and heaviness. Communication and dialogue is the ability to disagree without dividing. And projection and monologue is that you must be right at all cost. There's one narrative and yours is the correct one. And you will not give it up. Okay? So when you think about these lists that I just gave you, I think it's very clear that communication and dialogue, which is regenerative, has everything to do with taking no position separate from the other, being more interested in what you don't know than what you already know, being more interested in being together and exploring something than being right. Obviously, the projection and monologue is based on fear. So most of us, and it's ego. That whole list I gave you is basically a description of what ego looks like. So when you give yourself over to the idea that you're separate, isolated, and alone, the characteristics are basically the list that I gave you for projection and monologue. So how we live and how we communicate has everything to do with how we perceive the environment that we live in and how we perceive who we actually are. So if you perceive yourself deeper as that which is deeper and prior to what you think, what you feel, and maybe you don't know what that is. Maybe you've had a very deep experience of that. Maybe you've had hardly any or none, but somewhere there's an intuition that is very connected to the heart. And there's an attraction that pulls you from the heart. It pulls you saying, I don't know what this is. I don't know who I am, but I know I'm not this frustrated, messed up person who's always angry, who's always fighting, who's always not getting along with anyone, who's always trying to look happy, but underneath is not very happy. Okay, so when you perceive yourself to be isolated, separate, and alone, and you perceive yourself to be limited to the history of this particular body mind, when you perceive yourself to be less than that which is prior to, you're going to perceive the world very differently. And you're going to be afraid. You're going to feel rejected. You're going to feel like nobody loves you. You're going to crave for love. You're going to seek for happiness because you don't feel happy. And what happens is you're going to project all of that unhappiness, all of that unlove out onto the world that you live in, onto other people. And because you're projecting that, It's a monologue also going on in your head continuously. I'm alone. I'm not loved. I'm separate. I'm limited. I'm not happy. It's the voice in the back of your head, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And that's usually the voice that drives everyone to look for something other than that voice. Because if we were really satisfied with that voice, you wouldn't be on this webinar. Right? Everybody on this webinar is like drawn to something else, something more than what you already know. So there's already something activated in you that wants to communicate, wants to give yourself to regenerative activities, wants to dialogue with other people. You don't want to just sit home alone, have a conversation with yourself, project all your fears onto all the people that aren't there, give all the excuses of why you're unhappy and why you're victimized. You're not interested in doing that right now. You might be interested in doing that sometimes. And I'm sure everybody does that sometimes, especially when you're feeling a little pressure around something, then all of a sudden the world is shit and I'm a victim. And nobody talked to me because nobody loves me and there's nothing you can do to make me feel better. Okay. So everybody knows we got both sides going on, right? But what we really need right now in the world that we live in is we need more communication and we need more dialogue, which basically means we need more truth. And we need more people out there that are willing to communicate and be with the other person. And the only way that you can do that is you recognize deeply in yourself that that perceived other person is actually not other. Of course, there's another individual. We're looking at the screen. We got all these individuals on the screen. So we don't have to try to do something weird, where we're all going to morph into some big blob of whatever. It's not about trying to change your perception where the individuals disappear. There's nothing wrong with all these different manifestations of one consciousness. There's nothing wrong with that. The diversity is the beauty of this. Okay, but if you're thinking that you're separate, you won't see the beauty of the diversity. You'll be projecting your fears and your desires onto everyone. And then the communication that's possible doesn't actually occur. It can't occur because it's like you're walking around like this and you're trying to be with everyone, but all you're really with is a reflection of your own mind. You're having a conversation with your own mind. And it's not really you having a conversation with your own mind. It's your mind having a conversation with itself. It's just talking. But because we think what the mind is pumping out is who we are. We think we're having a conversation with the mind. We think we're having a problem with the thought. We think all sorts of things. And then you just close down and no communication is possible. So the interesting thing about communication and dialogue, two things. One is dialogue, usually, if you're in real dialogue with someone, you usually go beyond the original subject that you started to talk about. Have you ever noticed that? You could start talking about a conflict between you, and you could end up, if you don't divide and you're just with each other, you can end up ecstatically in love with each other. You can end up talking about a conflict and you can end, or you can start off talking about a conflict and you can end up seeing that there never has been a conflict and that it actually was pretty ridiculous that you were making such a big problem out of the conflict. And you can also come to a bigger understanding. So maybe the particular thing that you disagreed upon, maybe something else happened that brought you together completely in a different place. And the other thing that's very interesting about dialogue and communication, when you're willing to do this, when you're actually willing to have communication, dialogue about anything with another human being, whether it be your partner, your children, a group of people. But if there's more than one, what's possible is a collective emergence. And what collective emergence is, it's when you get more than one manifestation of consciousness coming together, deciding that being together is more important than anything else, and the willingness to have creative friction, to be able to speak and express yourself, to let the mask down, to just say, you know, this is what I think. Maybe it sounds stupid, but this is what I think. And the other person's like, well, this sounds stupid. What do you think? You can get into a creative flow where actually something emerges that would never be possible if you were alone. So a collective emergence can come out of dialogue. I mean, some people call it the we space. There was a few years ago, I did a conference all about we space, and everybody had different ways of talking about we space. But really, you know, you can have all sorts of techniques, but in the end, the only thing that happens when the we space actually comes out of the me space, when all the me's come together and something emerges in dialogue, it only happens when everybody's more interested in what they don't already know. And they're more interested in being together than being apart. And they're more interested in letting spirit speak through them. And then something happens. Something happens. And nobody can imagine what it would be because it hasn't happened yet. And if you think you can imagine what's possible with real communication and real dialogue, then it's all coming from your mind and it ain't going to happen. Because if you have an idea of how it's all going to happen, you're going to be limited because your actions are always going to be a projection of what you already think. Is everybody with me? Okay, so now probably some of you are sitting there and going, yeah, but how do I just communicate with my partner because we just can't get along? You know, everybody likes the practical stuff. So, you know, this is all very practical, what I'm talking about, but it's very demanding. So if you're in conflict with your partner, or your mother or your father, whoever the person is that you tend to be in conflict with, and you can't seem to have a conversation, it's probably because you're projecting onto that person and you've got a monologue going on in your head, and you're more engaged with that monologue, trying to do it right, trying to say the thing that you think they want you to say, trying to manipulate the situation so you get what you want. You have to drop all that in order to make real communication and real dialogue possible. So I'm not talking about just having a conversation so you can get along. You know, everybody can be nice. I mean, we can all be nice and we can all have nice conversations. But can we actually can we really come together in real communication? And I'm talking every day. Can we just be together? You don't always have to be talking about big spiritual matters. But you do need to take the position of being who you actually already are. Because if you're taking any other position, the person that that's in front of you, that you're trying to communicate with, becomes an object of your needs and desires. That's what happens. It's very, very simple. It's very black and white. And the painful thing about projecting, and next month, I want everybody to come back next month. I'm going to do the webinar. It's going to be on the ritual of rejection. So I'm not going to go into it too much tonight. But all of us, as we incarnate into a body, there is a deep shock of entering into a world as an incarnated being that causes you to assume a position of rejection. And you carry it with you your whole life. And what that rejection really says in the back of your mind, and you may not experience it this way, but if you look really closely into this, it will be, you don't love me. That's what it is. And if you're carrying that and you're walking around unconsciously operating from this rejection and then projecting the fear, projecting the unlove out, you see, you're never going to experience what's actually here, right now. You're not going to be able to experience the love that somebody's giving you. You're not going to be able to experience the love that's in your own heart because that presumption is so in place. And that is the birth of ego in that moment. That's what it is. It's the birth of I'm separate. It's the birth of the story of me, 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 me. It's the birth of wanting to be together, but can't be together, which is the presumption that you're separate when you're actually not. Okay, so we're all in the same boat. We all have the same presumptions, and we're all already free, happy, and the essence of who we are is love. But it doesn't help just to hear those words and try to make that be your experience. It doesn't work. Because if you're trying to make something be your experience, like I want to make my experience to be one of love, you see, you're already presuming that who you are is not love. There's already this presumption that there's something that's not here right now. And that's the movement of seeking that everybody usually does almost, their whole lives. So what we want to do is we want to learn these patterns within ourselves. We want to recognize them, and we want to just let them burn themselves out in the fire of your own heart. And you can do that just by trying to communicate with another person. You can do that by being in dialogue, and everybody knows what it feels like. You're having you want to communicate, you want to talk to somebody, and it's not going well. You're contracted because they're just not understanding what you want to say. They're saying something, maybe they're being aggressive with their position, maybe you're being aggressive with your position. But you see, in that moment, you can practice. You can practice, you can do something different, because we have the opportunity to communicate with people all the time. Well, a little bit less now that we're all in lockdown, but we can still, we still have the opportunity to have a different relationship to our minds and to what we think and what we believe. And sometimes I've heard a lot of people through this whole, I can't believe we're still in this situation. It's almost been a year. But a lot of people have said there's been a lot of awakening and self-understanding by being either locked up with themselves or locked up with their families, because you had to do something different. It was just unacceptable after a while. So a lot of pain has come out of this whole situation, but also a lot of awakening has come out of this situation. So we have to look at the whole picture, not trying to make it all good, not trying to make it all bad, but just embracing the whole thing. And and just recognizing right now, we need communication in this world. We need dialogue. What we've got, and I'm not going to get into anything political, but I think everybody knows that we're living in a time of great fear, censorship, just those two. If you look at those two, there's not much communication and dialogue going on if there's fear and censorship. So what are we going to do? This is the whole point. What are we going to do? Are we going to bow down and give up? Or are we going to do everything we can, whether we're alone, whether with other people? Because all of us have opportunities every single day, no matter what. We still have communication through the internet. We're still all here on this call. So already just coming together like this is a movement toward communication and dialogue. It's a movement away from projection and monologue. Otherwise, you'd be sitting in your house talking to yourself right now, telling you all the things that you already know, and reinforcing degenerative activities. So I like these words, regenerative and degenerative. It's something kind of like I read a while ago, and I really like it, because when you think about regenerative, just take a moment and go, wow, regenerative activities. Doesn't that do something to you? Makes you kind of want to do something, positive. It doesn't make you feel like you want to eat a bunch of crappy food and smoke cigarettes, does it? It doesn't really like go, yeah, let's do that. Degenerative, if you say degenerative, I mean, everybody, don't you get images in your mind of all the degenerative activities you've done or you could do, or you've wanted to do that you never have done? But you see, just the word itself. And so if you just think about it, what can I do that's a regenerative activity in every moment of your life? So if you're having a conversation with someone and you're just stuck in your own opinion, and you won't, and all of a sudden the person in front of you is just an object that you're trying to convince that you're, to come over to your side, that would be degenerative. You could feel it. In that moment, you can just go, okay, regenerative. Yeah, I remember I was on that webinar and she said, do regenerative things. Okay, I'm just going to look at the person. I'm going to look them in the eye. I'm going to be with them. I don't know what I'm going to say. They're actually irritating me quite a lot right now, but I don't care. I'm going to do a regenerative activity right this moment. You see, that's all you got to do. You're sitting at home, just thinking about how everything's so wrong and degenerative. You see, it's very easy. Regenerative. What do you do with the regenerative in that moment where you feel lost? You feel fear. You can just sit there and be present and allow all of it just to be there and not do anything with it. Regenerative activities can mean action, but they can also mean stopping. Because a lot of our degenerative activities are busy, doing, constantly running away from the truth of who you already are. And if you give yourself to spirit and you give yourself to being alive, being regenerative, you will be challenged, because we're very attached to being less than that. But if you give yourself to that, then you've got everything you need. And sometimes you'll feel alone, but you reach out to friends. Everybody needs help at different times. But, the world that I live in and the world that I want to be a part of, in the sphere of the people that I deal with, I only want people who are going to support regeneration. So I'm going to support regeneration in them. I'm not going to support degeneration in them, because at that time, I'm also supporting degeneration in myself. You can't have it both ways. You really can't. It's very absolute. And we're always trying to bargain with God, right? No, I'm really a regenerative person. I really, I want to be a free human being. I want to, but, I don't really want to tell this person. I don't want to be straight and direct. I want to be nice so they like me. That's degenerative. That's not communication. That's projection. That's fear. That's a monologue in your head that you're dramatizing. Is everybody getting what I'm saying? So I don't know if you're inspired or if you're kind of like, oh shit, this is much more complicated than I thought. It could be that, but it's actually very simple what I'm saying. But the mind is going to go, oh my God, this is too complicated. I don't know how to do all that. I just want to talk to somebody. Okay, well, that's fine. If you want to talk to somebody, that's the first step. But then what you want to do is you want to communicate. Because otherwise you're just going to end up talking at them and they're going to talk at you and you're going to walk away and, nothing has happened other than two egos have come together and had it, and kind of hung out for a while. So you got to decide what you want. You got to decide what kind of relationships you want to have. You got to decide how free you want to be. You got to decide if you want to communicate with your own heart, or if you want to project your fear onto your own being. You get to decide. That's good news, huh? It's good news if you want to be free. If you want to be a victim, it's not good news. Because it's very demanding. If you're a victim, you got to have somebody to blame. So what I'm telling you is everything is in your own hands. But it's not in your own hands to be the doer. It's in your own hands to surrender the doing. Okay, so let's just sit for a couple of minutes and then we're going to go into some questions. So again, everybody, if you want to sit up straight, just take a deep breath. And relax. And you don't have to do anything right now. You don't have to try to remember anything. You don't have to come up with a question. Just be here, be now. We've all just shared the last 53 minutes together. So we've all been in the same boat. We can just be here right now. Okay, everybody just take one deep breath in and exhale. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay, so let's do some communication and dialogue from a regenerative place. No performance anxiety.
I could ask a question.
Okay, hi Benedita.
Hi, nice to see you.
You too.
Yes, I've actually been with this with my hold on. We talk about this wanting to tell the other person what's going on. Like, okay, so I see that they are indulging in a degenerative pattern.
Okay.
And so sometimes I see that there's a contraction and there's like this place of wanting to not see it and end it immediately because I don't want it in front of me because it reminds me of my own stuff.
Okay, so can you just give me an example to make it kind of real?
Yeah. So for example, watching 3 hours of Netflix on the sofa.
Okay. Boy, nobody's ever done that before, have they? Okay.
Well, 3 hours is kind of too much, I think. But
Yeah.
so, and yeah, and of course, I can see it in me and I see it in the person. And I want to say it in a loving way. And sometimes I see that I can come from that place, but there's still anger. Is it possible that there's still anger, or am I projecting when I'm angry?
Well, you're already projecting onto them that you already know what's right. Because you're already assuming that watching Netflix for 3 hours on the couch is a bad thing, because it's been a bad thing for you. Because you've used it, for whatever. You've used it as an escape, or you've used it as an indulgence. So the first thing, if you come in with a position, then you're already coming in from a position of separation. I mean, you can have an idea like, wow, maybe it wasn't good that they were watching Netflix for 3 hours. But you see, you can always ask. You can always open up a dialogue with a question instead of like an accusation. And when you do that, you see, then you also have to drop the position that you already know, and you have to drop your own anger toward yourself for doing the same thing. So everybody always wants to do something lovingly and caringly and spiritually correct and nicely, right? But a lot of times we don't want to drop the position that we're right. We don't want to open a dialogue up with the person, because with dialogue and communication comes vulnerability, because you're actually in relationship with the person. And so if you're interested in being in relationship with the person and you enter into something in a vulnerable way, and maybe you've seen something that they've been doing that's degenerative, but you want to be able to engage with them, then you're with them in a dialogue. You're not projecting your fear of doing it wrong. You're not projecting your fear of not doing it nicely onto them, because if that projection is already there, you're not with them. You're having a monologue in your head, and you're trying to get through the conversation and get them to see. That's why one of the things on the projection monologue was hidden agendas, because you're trying to get them to see. So it's not to say we're going to deny a situation, but you're going to open it up with a question and without taking a position in yourself. But you see, that's why it's important. You got to be able to, if you're going to have compassion, and if you're going to reach out and really engage with another person, that means you also have to engage with yourself. That means you have to, when, 3 hours on Netflix, like I said earlier, if you ask them a question and you open up a dialogue, you also have to, in that moment, if that's also your habit, you see, you're also opening up a dialogue with yourself in order to see more. And that's what I meant when you're in dialogue and communication. You might start off with having a conversation with someone about 3 hours of Netflix. But if you come with an open heart and not projecting, and they meet you with an open heart and they don't project onto you, you could start off with Netflix and you could end up someplace completely different. So the conflict actually is the catalyst for a higher integration, you could say, a higher intelligence to come forward. And I think that's what's very interesting, because if you're interested in that higher resonance, you could say, you're not going to be afraid of conflict. But that's the trick, because being in real relationship means that you have to be undefended. Because real relationship means there's no separation. If there's no separation, there's no one to defend yourself from. But that's also goes, it sounds weird because we're very schizophrenic and from one perspective, because we're always having this weird relationship with ourselves. We're in the same kind of projection monologue with ourselves that we are with other people. So can we stop doing it to ourselves? Yes, but we have to do the same thing to ourselves. We have to be interested and curious and engaged and truthful and wanting to transcend anger and fear, and we have to be willing to do that.
Mm.
And you know, if you're angry with somebody else, it's usually, like you were saying, it's a reflection back to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's the moment, you see, instead of trying to manage that anger and trying to be nice, you just look at it and go, wow, look at that. That anger is really more directed to me, but I'm trying to put it out to them.
Yeah.
And maybe in that moment, you don't even bring anything up to them. Maybe you just go, oh God, this is really all about me in the end. But you don't really have to do anything with your own anger in that moment also, because you can just be with them. And then what's happened is you've transcended your own pattern in that moment. That's the beauty of the opportunity.
Mm.
But it's not, you know, it's not from your head. It has to be from the heart. It
Yeah.
can't be strategic, because if it's strategic, it's an agenda and it's manipulative. You just got to be out there naked and be willing to have a conversation with somebody.
Mm.
Right when I said that, I just had this flash. You know, if everybody kind of just imagine themselves having naked conversations, you see, you already feel a little, there's like something comes alive, right? It's like, oh my God, naked conversations. It's much better than like, oh. But you know, when you just think about naked conversations, even if you're not really naked, but just if you think about being naked and having a conversation, it puts you in the right direction. Don't you think? It brings like lightness of being, you know, you can't really take yourself so seriously if you're having a naked conversation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you're really serious and you want to be really spiritual and you want to have a good conversation, you don't want to project your anger out, but you don't really want to take your own anger on. There's nothing naked about that. You've got so much armor on you, you can't even find the other person. Anyway, I'm just trying to, you know, it's just important that all of us, you know, we're just willing to have fun and be happy, even in conflict and even in, you know, difficult situations. Because most of the time the situation is much more difficult just because you're resisting, because you're afraid. You know, if there's a conflict or a difficult situation, it's usually because we're afraid to feel.
Mm.
We just don't want to feel conflict. We don't want to feel intensity. We just want to be kind of numb. Just leave me alone with my inertia, right? Leave me alone. I'm just inertic. I'm very balanced. Sorry, I'm feeling a little feisty right now, so I hope I'm not offending anyone too much, but only I am happy to offend you just a little bit.
Thank you for your answer, Cynthia.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question. Okay, anybody else want to be offended? Let's do it. That's probably not a good marketing ploy, is it? To get people to talk.
I'll say
Yeah,
something.
Who's that? Is that Albert?
Yeah,
Albert, I'm so happy. You're always on the webinars.
yeah. There's a reason for that.
What's
And
the
before,
reason?
well, before I get naked on Zoom, let me give you what came up for me, but based on your great talk. First of all, I don't think I could approach many of my and we're talking about relationships, I guess, in general, but
Yeah.
you know, I think for a long time my heart was closed, so there was no way I was going to be this open-hearted individual that could get any creativity around dealing with some people who just, you know, just irritated me. But I'm much, much further along with that. But I will tell you how I think I got there first. And it was really getting awareness around that victimization thing, and that how I was, when I saw that big no in August of 2018, and I really related to that victimization. A real life example was once I got honest about how this was intellectual, once I got honest about how I was a victim in so many and took ownership of it in so many areas of my life, only then was I allowed to feel that intimacy, and intimacy with the group that I was relating with there, about that on I was so dishonest about my own victimization. And so, and I would say that that was an intellectual thing. And I know from my own awareness and deepening on the intellectual side that if I'm dissatisfied in a conversation, say, say like this conversation, I will become absent. It's just the way I withdraw. And I stay in that dissatisfaction mode, that victimization of that dissatisfaction. But unless I get awareness around that, I don't get that creativity, so to speak, that I think you were alluding to, that allows me to get out of that lower state, so to speak, right?
Hmm.
But sometimes that's not even good enough. I have to balance it almost with my emotional intelligence, because I know on that side, when I feel like constricted, like I'm not allowed to watch 3 hours of Netflix because my partner doesn't want me to. If I feel that, I feel like I'm being disrespected, and I come from a whole nother angst with that. So it's kicking back and forth between those two kind of like realms of emotional, I'll call it intelligence, and intellectual intelligence, that really I have to work in order to have that, ultimately, that heartgasm that we're talking about, where you fall in love and you get nude on Zoom.
No, but
So
it's different than that. I like heartgasm though. That was cool. Um, I haven't heard that before. I think I might steal that one from you if it's
yes,
okay.
it's not, yeah, it's okay. It's not mine, but I don't know where it came from.
Oh, okay. Well then,
Yeah, it's out there somewhere.
okay. Okay, good. Um, you see, but a lot of what you're describing, Albert, well, first of all, I would challenge if it's really the way you operate, because it's very strategic what you're saying. And there's you, and from what I'm understanding, from what you're saying, the intellectual intelligence and the emotional intelligence, and trying to find some balance. You see, the problem with what you're saying, there's no freedom in it. Am I understanding you correctly?
Uh, I'm getting what you're saying. I'll just add that there can be exceptional freedom when I get creative about how I'm going to make the situation at a much, higher level. That's where the
Yeah, but you see-
creativity and the freedom is, in that creativity.
Right, but see, the thing is that you're in there doing everything. You're in there trying to make the situation more creative, which means you have an idea that you have to do something. You have an idea what it's going to be more creative, and you have an idea of what you have to do. And, and then you've got this person in front of you, or multiple people, whoever it is, your partner in this case, and they're the object that's kind of in the way of you getting to the result that you're hoping for through this whole kind of process. That's what it sounds like. And what I'm saying to you is that there's a subtlety in this of just allowing yourself to be with the person, and being courageous enough, if you want to watch 3 hours of Netflix, to not, and you really want to do it, and you see it as not a degenerative activity, it's a regenerative activity in that moment, and you're sure about that, and your partner's not going to like it. Can you have the courage to just communicate that this is what you'd like to do, and this is why you're doing it, and do it because that it's the right thing to do in that moment, without trying to um, manipulate anything.
Yeah, in that case, I think where I would try to manipulate it, quote unquote, which is I think I am free and allowing it to come up. Sometimes I amaze myself with the creativity. So
Mhm.
and it's not something that could be planned. But yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm having a senior moment, but that's the essence of it. I do feel free in that. I'm not saying I always did, but I think I can
Yeah.
honestly say that I feel free, because I feel that intimacy grow. I feel that, that I don't know, that level of community, that feeling you get when the communication is so regenerative. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. But I think that, in the situation that you offered, sometimes there has to be a compromise. For example, if my partner is really upset because, she wants me to do something else, let's say, or I had promised to do something else, and I got self-absorbed in, the crown, so to speak, right? Uh, then I got to realize that, I can't always have it my, life according to Albert. I have to balance. There has to be a balancing, and whether it's toggling between IQ and EQ, I don't know, or that love that you talked about, if there's a third dimension there. But I don't find it so. I find it creative, but it's got a lot going on.
Yeah, but there's something, because I totally agree, obviously in relationship, there has to be compromises. But how we do those compromises is a very interesting thing because, and it depends on what your relationship is based on. If it's based on that you want to support only the truth in each other, and that's the most important thing, then it's going to open up all sorts of ways to look at something that isn't maybe conventional, isn't traditional in a certain way, because maybe it opens up completely different dialogues where what you want and what she wants is kind of irrelevant. It's really not the most important thing. The most important thing is, are you in relationship with each other? Are you communicating? You see, because that's much more interesting doing that than anything else. And there's also nothing wrong. I mean, this is where there's so much subtlety to this, and you can't really plan ahead.
Right.
On how it's going to look. You just have to give yourself to the process. And then you will, it's like your eyes will be opened again and again and again.
Right.
To something so, just to simple things, just to, they're simple, but yeah, for example, I mean, just a couple of days ago, I just recognized this whole relationship I had to being victimized that I never even thought I was having. And it was, it just came to me in a way because I give myself to my practice every day. And all of a sudden, something arose that liberated me in a way that I've never been liberated. Could I have thought about this with my head? Could I have done different activities to make myself see this? I don't think so. I think, those are moments where you give yourself to wanting to be a free human being, and grace comes forward. And shows you something so subtle and so far beyond the conditioned mind. And, and then it then you get in touch with this incredible lightness of being and bliss, but not in an emotional way, more of something deep down inside of you that you recognize. So I think that's it. We can all, I mean, I think the time that I've known you, you are very interested in this. You've changed a lot from what I can tell. But then you have to decide, how free do you want to be? Because you have to just keep going. You can't settle for anything less than everything, which you don't even know what that is. But all you do, your whole life becomes about giving yourself to spirit, giving yourself to your own heart's, the deepest heart's longing. I'm not talking about just preferences. And I feel like that's what you've been doing since I met you. And obviously, and there's a process going on there. And if you keep giving yourself to that process, and that's the most important thing to you, you see, you will be communicating in a different way. You will be having a different relationship to your own mind and to all the people around you, even more different than you already are.
Yeah, I welcome that mystery unfolding in me. I mean, that's why I keep coming.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying, because since I've met you, I know that's in place. and you do things, like I remember seeing I don't know how I found this out, but when you went to clown school and you were the only one that wasn't actually a real clown.
Or an actor, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like everybody would do that, Albert. When I heard you doing that, I thought, God, would I go to clown school with a bunch of actors? I was like, I don't know. I think I would be challenged, but anyway, so it's things like that, that keep opening up. And then of course you've got the things that you're doing, but also there's a way of just giving yourself to spirit in the quietness of your own space and seeing where that takes you. So sometimes it's like outward activities, and sometimes it's like just inward, relaxation. And
I've grown to love silence. I'm almost addicted to silence now, a silence inside me.
fantastic. You see, and that's what I'm talking about when I say falling in love. See, you're falling in love with the silence. It's like it's a heart attraction. It's not you trying to be in love with silence. It's just occurring. And a lot of times we're trying to be in love with spirit. We're trying to like emulate or a certain something that we think we should have to show that we're spiritual, to show that we're on the right track. And that's just an egoic movement, but it does help to move things along. But eventually you just have to recognize and this is where the moment you have to actually allow yourself to be in communication and to be in real heart attraction, to allow yourself to feel what you actually really want. Like really feel it without knowing what it means. And then something will come forward. And that's the sign, when you say you're falling in love with silence, you see, that's what you fall ever so deeply into that silence until you dissolve. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I always like talking with you.
Same here.
I was thinking about you today. I thought, if I ever go to the States again, I'm going to call Albert, see if he wants to hang out.
I definitely will.
I know.
Yeah.
Cool.
I welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we got time for one more. Oops, I see Nina crawling to the computer. It's nice to see Nina. Are you?
Hello, Cynthia.
Hi. It's nice to see you with Moana and Ibrahim also. And I can't see John.
Yeah.
Hello. Hey, Jonathan and Katja. Yeah, cool. You guys are taking over Switzerland. I like it.
Almost.
Like listening to happy Swiss people. Wow, that's amazing.
We were giggling all the time.
Of course, you do have one American there to help you along.
It's a bit difficult. We have two screens, so I have to look at the other one so you can see me. Yeah, my question is actually quite simple. We just also talked about this in the holo on how to just be with somebody, even if not necessarily always a constructive communication is possible. This is sometimes the case with my father, where I have experienced a lot of beauty growing out of our relationship over the last years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm noticing very often now, very easily we can just be together. But then also what I'm noticing is sometimes it's just not possible to have a good communication in terms of talks. So when
do you have an idea of what you should be talking about though? Or do you have an idea of what a good communication topic would be?
Probably. So of course, one idea would be that I would like to agree with him a bit more. Or
well, from what you told me about your father, that's probably not going to happen. So
Exactly. So it's not exactly about, yeah, that we need to, but my question is, can it be that it's just not possible to communicate in terms of speaking with someone, but of course I can still be with them, right? And then maybe the communication is happening without words. Is that, or would you not call that communication and dialogue anymore?
Well, I wouldn't, I mean, it depends on how, I mean, obviously people say you can communicate without speaking and dialogue can be happening. But I think the thing is you've got to drop the ideas of what it is that you're expecting should happen. Because, you know, if you're just actually with him with no expectations, then what will happen will happen. But I think there is some idea in there that something particular has to, you know, something particular has to happen, or the flavor of something particular has to happen in order for you to feel satisfied that you've had some kind of communication. Because maybe there's just certain topics that you know, that you're very far apart, and it doesn't really make sense to even talk about them anymore. But there are ways that you can just be together and find a common ground.
Yeah, and that's
You know,
what I've been noticing. Yeah, and it's, yeah, it's as you say, it
but
definitely works as long as I'm not expecting any. And I can see
yeah,
myself starting to separate as soon as I bring up a topic that he reacts to, or he brings up something, then I react.
well, but I think, you know, I think if you're having a reaction, you should be able to handle that
Yeah.
and not react
Yeah.
because you know better, right?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what, you know, I don't know what he knows and what he understands, but I do know that all human beings, you know, we all come from the same source and we all want to be loved and we all want to give love. And sometimes people don't know how to do that. And sometimes there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of projection, there's a lot of, you know, resentment. There's a lot of feeling like, you know, I'm not good enough. And, you know, that he might be feeling that you've always looked down on him in certain ways, and vice versa. There might be all sorts of stuff getting in the way. But if you show up undefended, completely undefended, you just show up and you don't know what's going to happen. And you're just with him and you just look at him and say whatever you want to say. But, you know, even if you just say, you know, I really love you. We don't get along. We can't even hardly talk to each other, but I still love you.
Yeah, I've been saying that to him a few times lately, actually.
Yeah. You know, and then eventually, even if he's your father, there's no rule that says that you have to have any particular relationship with your father. We all think, you know, our fathers are our mothers, you know, of course. Those are the ones that show to us. If we can't have conversations with our fathers and mothers, then there must be something, you know, we must be doing something wrong. And probably we are doing something wrong. But then also we can just drop the idea and the insistence that you have to meet your father and your mother because they're your father and your mother.
Mhm.
You can meet anyone in the heart, but you may not particularly want to hang out with everybody. But we have this idea that we should want to hang out with our mothers and fathers. And maybe we just don't. Maybe they don't even want to hang out with us. Maybe we're just two completely different people. We love each other. We don't, you know. But if we have an idea, the reason I'm bringing this up is if we have a particular idea that something should be a particular way and I should be able to do this and they should be able to do that. And because we're, you know, when you're father and daughter, there's all sorts of karma that's attached to that. And how that karma is going to be burned, you have no idea. All you can do is show up and do your best. But you have to do your best and not worry about what he's doing.
Yeah.
And then if he doesn't, you know, if he's not interested in meeting you, then you have to do your best of just not dividing, but maybe you don't want to spend time together. Or maybe you find that there's one activity that you can really enjoy together and that's what you do. You know, that's where you can start. You know, there's no limitation on this. So I don't want to put out the ideas like, you know, well, because people always say, you know, what about all those other egos in the world? You know, I can't really be myself because of all these other egos. And I know that's not what you're saying. But you know, ego is really about limitation. And I just know I've got to take care of any limiting ideas that I have about anything and show up. And then that's all you can do. And see what happens. But you know, that's a tall order. You know, that's a demand on you. And you know, it's going back to what Albert was saying about a victim. We can't be victimized by the relationship with our parents. We have to show up anyway with an open heart. And then you find out, oh my God, I actually still am victimized by this or by that. Okay, then you move on and you keep going. I don't know if that helps you or answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It gives more clarity and simplicity to this.
Yeah, because you know, it's like parental experience, you know, parental relationships are pretty, they're like, what's the word? They're like a minefield, you know, but it's not impossible. If you step on one mine, then at least that one's already been blown and you can learn and keep going through the field.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You know, it's really just about everybody, just if you give yourself to regenerative communication and dialogue and regenerative activities as much as you can, if not all the time, if you do that, you see, you will have a different perception of who you are, who other people are, and what's possible. Your perception will change. And if your perception changes, then anything's possible. But if you give yourself to degenerative, your perception is not going to change. It's going to be one of egoic limitation and separation. And then that's the filter that you're looking in. That's the projection that you're putting out. And that's what you're going to get back. So we all get to decide, you know. But I can tell you, when you're challenged the most, it's the most important time of your life. It's not always fun. It's not always easy. But if you want to be a free human being, it is what it is. You know, and if you're able to just allow yourself to burn in that fire of purification when something is intense, you'll find something in yourself, like what Albert was saying is falling in love with the silence. You'll fall in love with God. You'll fall in love with divinity. You'll fall in love with whatever it is for you. And then you see that heart attraction's been opened up. It's like the road is open. And instead of being, you know, walking along with one leg and a crutch and okay, I guess that's probably God telling us that it's 9:30. Because we just bounced off. Did you notice? I thought we were being censored or something. Too much love and truth going on. Poof, you know. Anyway, I don't think that was it. I think it was really just bad internet connection. Okay, so that's yeah, it's always good to be with everybody. I think it's 9:30 and I always try to finish a bit on time, so seems like an hour and a half is just, it's like always just enough time. And everybody still wants more. We could keep going. One day maybe we'll change it to 2 hours, but right now we'll stick with an hour and a half. All right. So does anybody have anything that they wanted to say, or should we finish up for tonight? Everybody's good? Everybody in Switzerland just left. All right, so Laura's going to do her thing, and then we'll finish up. But everybody, please just you guys can have the recording to this call, and I really hope you listen to other webinars again, because actually a lot happens on these webinars, and there's a lot said, and it's really about living what we're talking about. It's not about really being entertained. It's about really living it and engaging with people on a different level. And I tell you, we need it so much right now. We need it. So I just encourage everybody to just do whatever you've got to do to move forward yourselves. Okay, I'm gonna. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. That was amazing. It's a really fantastic webinar. So I just want to tell you guys that the next webinar is March the 3rd. And as Cynthia mentioned, it's called What is the Ritual of Rejection?
Not what is, it's just the ritual.
Okay, the ritual of rejection. And I will send out all the details in an email over the next couple of days with the recordings, and you're very welcome to share them with anyone at all. They're public. And then you can also, we're starting to put events on our event page. So we have a weekend meditation retreat here in May and a public women's retreat. So I'll also send a link to that, because hopefully by May we can all be together again. And the 10-day retreat in August will go ahead. I also remind you, and I'll send out details in the email tomorrow, that Cynthia runs these webinars by donation. So if you're feel inspired to donate, you'll have all the details in the email. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. Does everybody want to open up? So for all the new people, this is where it gets kind of fun. Everybody opens up their microphones and their cameras, and then we all just say whatever we want to say. And then it gets kind of weird, because sometimes people don't want to leave, and we're all just looking at each other in kind of a weird way. And sometimes people just start checking out. And so then you feel like I should get off because I'm going to look like a weirdo if I'm the last one. There's all sorts of stuff that can happen in the next. Okay, so it's new. I'm just warning you. I'm just warning you a little bit. So you're ready. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're going to unmute.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, Cynthia, it was amazing.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone.
Laura. Thank you, everybody.
Inspiring.
Hello, Albert.
Nice to be here again.
I know, it's good to see everyone.
Very good. Thank you.
Lovely to see everyone.
Yeah, you too.
Good to see you. Thank you, Cynthia.